I didn't want cash flow in 10 years. I wanted cash flow in 2 days. I wanted something that would be profitable from day one. Once I got one customer, my business was profitable. So you have to pick the right business to do that.
Welcome to another episode of the Spring Studio Spotlight podcast. I am Tristan, co-founder, CEO of Spring Studio, and today we're talking with Daniel of Talently. We'll explore the unique benefits of offshoring talent to South Africa, the importance in trust in remote work, and why every entrepreneur needs a robust cold outreach strategy. That's my personal favorite part of the episode.
Cold outreach is tough, and it's getting tougher. It doesn't work anymore to send generic emails saying this is what we do, this is the value we can provide, and blah, blah, blah. If you figure it out, cold outbound is the biggest cheat code in business because it costs you nothing. The best thing you can do as a business, and something I'm doing constantly, is asking the question of your buyer. I can grow an amazing business, a very profitable business that runs cash flow positive, and I can build a great lifestyle for myself. I don't want a yacht and I want to hang out with Bezos. Like, I want to make X amount of money where I'm comfortable. I can spend time with my family and kids and go golf when I want and go on vacations when I want. Like, that's what I want. Knowing what you want and also the timeline of what you want out of it is so important in entrepreneurship.
Daniel, what's up, man? Good to have you here. Excited to chat with you and learn about Talently and what you guys are building over there.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, and I've been a listener to the Spring Studio podcast a few times now, so I'm excited to have a conversation ourselves. And even before we started recording, I even complimented on your pristine background and setup here. You're a true podcasting professional, video and audio, all good to go.
I appreciate that. Yeah, replicating the Apple Store as closely as I possibly can.
Yeah, I feel like they know a little bit about more about home decor and design than you, maybe a little bit more. So it's good to take tips from the pros.
Just a touch. Awesome. Well, I'm excited to dive in. Can you maybe give us like a 15, 20-second intro about yourself and what you guys are building with Talently?
Yeah, for sure. So excited to be on the podcast. Good to be connected with the listeners here. The long story short of my background is I've been an employee for over a decade in specifically B2B SaaS sales. Started my career SDR, entry-level account executive, sort of make my way in the software world, all the way up to the VP of sales level in my most recent role. But recently I've taken the leap into entrepreneurship and started my own business. A company is called Talently, and we run, in the most simple terms, we run an offshore staffing and recruiting firm. So we work with North American and mostly UK-based businesses, and we help them hire amazing talent outside of their markets. But our niche is very specific, and it's very specific to one country, which happens to be South Africa. And we can sort of go into the reasons why that is, or how that came to be, and how the business sort of evolved. Because when we started the business, this was not our niche, this was not our focus, but it has been evolved to this now, and that's our focus and driving force right now. So we can get into the details there, but that's the short on my background. A decade B2B SaaS sales, entry-level VP, now a first-time founder.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I think there's two threads that we can pull on. One is, why on earth did you decide to leave the 9-to-5 and start your own thing? Because that takes a special type of crazy. And then the second is the pivot that you mentioned to South Africa. Can you let's maybe start there? Like, what about South Africa gets you excited about the offshore talent and the talent that's out there and
Yeah, for sure. So I'll give some context and will help, I guess, paint the picture a little bit better. So my most recent role, as I mentioned, as VP of sales for a tech company. I'm based here in Toronto, Canada. And I joined the business, and my background was always in VC-backed companies. Big bankrolls, fancy offices, nice laptops, lunches coming into the office, all that good stuff. And a couple of those companies had good exits. A couple of those companies turned into fairy dust, but that's what happens in the VC world. But my most recent company I was with was Bootstrap. And when I joined the company, I'm like, bootstrapping, like, sounds good, different, let's figure it out. And then when I came into the company, I quickly realized that bootstrap just means that you're poor. The fancy word for poor. And the tech community's done a really good job of branding themselves as bootstrap, but that just means you have no money. And for us, when it came to growth, and we grew it very successfully, it's an amazing company. A big part of our growth strategy was using talent outside of our core markets, because North American talent is expensive. There's no way around that. And we were 100% remote business. So we had people in Brazil and Spain and Romania, and people supported us in Pakistan and stuff like that. And I sort of sat front row and saw the benefit of using global talent. But the other side of it is I also saw the issues and pain points associated with it. So I sort of sniffed out an opportunity of like, one, there's clearly a benefit here. Two, there's clearly problems. And if I can go solve these, then I can provide a valuable service to the client base. And for me, and I don't know if this resonates with you or maybe it resonates with some of the listeners, is when you go offshore, other than time consumption and legal stuff and things like that, those are always going to be a problem. The biggest issues that we ran into, or me personally, I ran into, was language barrier. Every country we worked with, the English wasn't their first language. Our company spoke English, our clients spoke English, and that created a lot of friction for us. And then the second side is I really found there was a lack of business acumen or critical thinking skills and stuff like that. Like, it was very limited in some countries, and this isn't a complete generalization. There's amazing talent in other places, but I found a lot of the talent really didn't connect from a business concept that we had in North America. So I went out to go solve that problem. And going to the business pivot and going into this sort of answers both questions. Like, I had this epiphany, there's an amazing service to be provided here and business to be grown if I can solve these problems. When I started the business, my initial hypothesis was I'm going to find talent anywhere in the world. You're a company, I'll source you talent anywhere. And I set up recruiting teams in 10 different countries to cover all the different continents. Horrible idea, so stupid. Time zones were a mess, payrolls were a mess, like everything was a mess. But I realized my first few like clients and tranche of clients only wanted to speak to and connect with talent from one country, South Africa. And we sort of scrapped all other markets. We went all in on South Africa. When you take a step back and think about it, it just makes so much sense. South Africans, for people who don't know, native English speaking country, their first language. So everyone speaks perfect English. That's the only language they speak. Two, it's super high education level. There's 7 of the top 10 universities in the entire continent of Africa are in South Africa. So everyone's very well educated. And it's the business hub of Africa. Like Joburg is like New York, Cape Town's like Miami. Like it's the business hub of Africa. So everyone's sort of wired to work in business. Everyone works hard. Everyone hustles. Everyone wants to make money. So that sort of trifecta makes it perfect as an offshoring market. But it's also interesting because in the offshoring world, historically, people associate offshore with very cheap markets like India, Philippines, and Pakistan and stuff like that, which those are amazing markets and amazing talent there. And it is the cheapest market for sure. South Africa is a premium compared to those markets, but it's still 50, 60, 70% cheaper than North America. So South Africa sort of is an interesting niche of like, it is premium in the offshoring world, but the talent is in what we've seen as superior. But it's a little bit more expensive than some of the cheaper markets that are out there.
Thanks for the recap. That's really interesting. I'd love to learn a little bit more about that talent that is in South Africa. I mean, it sounds like there's not like one general specialized talent pool where it's like certain countries tend to, I mean, I don't want to generalize here, but it's like certain countries tend to produce talent that is very focused on specific things like design or marketing or something like that. Have you seen any sort of trend with South African talent where it's like amazing, designers, marketers, or is it like more operational, like VAs, stuff like that?
Yeah, for sure. It's a good question. So I think you hit the nail right on the head. Is like South Africa, in most countries, there's things that people are world-class at and there's things that people aren't world-class at. I think it's really important to be transparent and upfront with that right off the bat and be realistic with it as well. Like if you came to me and said, I need 5 machine learning engineers, I would say go somewhere else. Like South Africa does not have the best machine learning engineers. Like go to Eastern Europe or something like that, or the US or wherever it may be that has that talent. But with that being said, South Africa is world-class when it comes to like finance, accountants, bookkeepers, accounts receivable, payroll, that kind of stuff, marketing, designers, web designers, paid media people, social media people, that kind of stuff, support, executive assistants, account managers, support reps, and sales. And these are really more, not the like creative, but like creative, interactive, customer-facing roles. Like that's really what they're strong at. Developers, there's good developer talent, engineering talent there. Is it the best? Is it the best bang for your buck? Probably not. So that's really what we focus in is like finance, marketing, sales, and support. The 4 categories that we just know that the talent is going to deliver. The talent's going to be world-class, but they're also going to be world-class trained. Like we place accountants that worked at Ernst & Young or PwC. Like these people are working at serious companies with serious training and serious background. So yeah, it's a really great sort of win-win situation. North American companies get access to amazing talent. South African employees get access to great companies and new jobs that they're going to be able to get paid a premium compared to working for a South African company. So it's a really great mutual fit.
Nice. So speaking of mutual fit, how do you at Talently like to ensure that the talent that you place is going to be a great fit, is going to be, maybe fit is even the wrong word, a great addition to a company? Because like most companies, I'm just speaking on experience myself, it's like we hire amazing designers no matter where they live, not to just like fit in a box. We want them to bring something special, something unique to the table. So instead of fitting into a box, like how can they be the best addition to the team?
Yeah, for sure. And that's where, and we were speaking about this before, is like our services are similar, but very different. And I think it's amazing what you guys do, and it's an incredible service. And we were just saying like the globalization of talent and the sort of specialization of services is just going to continue to grow. In your guys' business and specializing and providing this turnkey design is amazing. You don't have to hire a team. You don't have to vet them. They're already pre-vetted. They can work. They know how to get things done immediately, and you can plug and play, which is awesome. On our side of it, really, we work on a very custom basis. So we don't have like a Rolodex of candidates that we're always just plugging and playing and moving them in and out. That's not what we're looking for. Every one of our clients, whether it's a 10-person accounting firm or a 500-person tech company, they're going to want something different out of that role, whether it's the same title or different title. So what we do, and not to go too into detail, but we run a 2-week custom search process for every single role. So every single time we get a new role, we get a new client, we start from scratch. We say, hey, you tell us, let's talk about your role. What are you looking for? What's your criteria? What's the experience? What's the pay range that you're looking for? And we have a headhunting team that goes out and pursues talent that fits that profile. And then we have connections to local job boards, university networks. We have a huge social following on LinkedIn to get the word out. And we pool in the best talent either we have in our database or that's out there in the market. And from there, we've created, and if anyone has recruited before, everyone knows how time-consuming it can be, we've created a semi-automated system to take that pooling, which on average right now, we source about 200 qualified people per role. So a ton of people. Like if someone comes to us saying we're looking for a graphic designer with 5 years of Canva experience and 3 years of e-commerce experience, we're going to find them at least 200 people that fit that profile. And then we run them through the ringer. We have a resume matching system, questionnaires, and then skill testing assessments. And our pass rate right now is just below 6%. So we start with 200, we get down to 10 to 12 people, then we interview all of them. So we have 15-minute phone calls with every single candidate that makes it to the finals. And then we pick the best 2 to 5 candidates for our clients to review. And then we send that to our clients in a fancy sheet. We summarize their personal information, their professional information, their resume, and we get every candidate to record a 2-minute video introduction and submit their portfolio. Candidate checks them out, we schedule the interviews, and bing, bam, boom, you're good. And that's like our problem. Going back to what I saw an opportunity before, and we'll talk about sort of getting into entrepreneurship, is like I saw how time consuming this process was. I saw like the issues associated with offshore talent, and if we could solve that, it can be fixed. And that combination is incredible value to our clients and our partners. It's like, hey, if you can save us 50 hours that we're going to dedicate to recruiting, and if you can make sure you find us amazing talent that's going to be 50% less than what we were going to pay, sign me up all day. So that's the sort of combination.
Yeah, no brainer. I mean, and just from like an operational standpoint, or I guess just a business standpoint, it sounds unsustainable from my view. It's like, how are these guys doing it? Like I'm thinking about the process that you put in place to take 200 candidates down to 10 or 12, and then from those 10 or 12 to filter even further to 2 or 3. Like just that process alone is going to be time consuming, labor intensive on your side. And it's one of those things that any company who's hired before, recruited before, knows intimately. Like they know that process and what a pain in the ass it can be. So
Yeah.
like you taking that off of their plate.
Yeah, there's no way around it. Believe me, when I started the business, it wasn't as streamlined and quick and effective as it is now. And in 6 months from now, it's probably I'm going to look back and be like, I can't believe I used to do it that way. So you always are sort of evolving and iterating. But yeah, you're right. The time consumption is insane, and you'll never meet anyone who's a hiring manager be like, oh, I love screening resumes. No one likes doing it. It's part of the job, but if you can take it off your plate, then there's value to be had.
So sourcing talent from South Africa, I mean, it sounds like the talent there fits that specific, essentially 4 categories that you guys specialize in. I read a LinkedIn post that you posted, I think it was yesterday, talking about having to issue a refund. I think anybody in business has had to do that once or twice, hopefully not many times, but maybe once or twice. Can you tell me, why did you think it was the right move at the time? And was there anything that you learned from it that has changed, like operationally, to like make sure that doesn't happen again, or that you don't need to do that again?
Yeah, for sure. It's a good question. And it's funny. I've thought about it a lot because this is my first time issuing a refund. This is my first time issuing a refund out of my own pocket with my own company. And that's a big thing, is like, now that I'm an entrepreneur, now my name's on the company and everything that operates. My previous companies, I would issue refunds, understand it's short-term pain, long-term gain, like the best thing you do for your customer. Now, when I see it removed from my bank account, it sits differently. And this situation came up, and it was a client of ours that I have a very good relationship with. We placed a candidate with him. It didn't work out as we thought it was going to. They ended up terminating him, which is perfectly fine. It's part of employment. They were outside of any sort of refund period or termination period, but we didn't have anything set up in place. And I just really had a gut feeling, is like, hey, if I was in their shoes, how would I want to be treated? How would I want to be perceived? How would I want the other side to act in this situation? And I could have kept the X thousands of dollars that we had, or I can go to the bank and refund them that day and get it done. And for me, I truthfully slept on it for like a couple nights before even offering the refund to the client, because again, these are decisions that weigh very heavily on you as an entrepreneur. When this business is on your back and it's your brand and your bank account, it should and can create sleepless nights. If it's not creating sleepless nights, you probably don't care enough. And for me, I always have this gut feeling of like, hey, I should do the good thing, come out on top, offer the refund to try to build goodwill, but also just to make sure that you're doing the right thing. And the second I hit wire, I just had a relief come over me that like, hey, done, it's over with. This is the best thing I could have done. And now it's interesting, to your point about how we've adjusted this, is we've actually clarified like policies and our agreements and our client communication of what happens in these type of situations in the future. And it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It doesn't mean we're going to have things that fall out of place, but I think it's also helped us readjust our expectation settings with our clients and make sure that we're all on the same page from the beginning. And that's the nice thing about being an entrepreneur, running your own company, is like, hey, if you see something like this that creates friction or might come up in the future, you can just go change it and make an adjustment. In previous companies, you have to get sign off and legal have to get involved. Your boss would have to approve, and then that boss would have to be approved, and it doesn't move very quickly. But now I have the flexibility to like see problem, fix problem. And that was the sort of backstory there. And to the point on LinkedIn, I use LinkedIn very heavily just to like share stories, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs run in these sort of silos, and I like sharing stories and exposing, because I was an employee who always wanted to start a company, and it took me over 10 years to bite the bullet and actually do it. It was the best thing personally I've done for my own life. And I think there's all these fears in business of like, oh, entrepreneurship and business is very hard, which it is. But there's not a lot of people who speak about it openly and sort of take that barrier down, that like, hey, business actually isn't that complicated. Provide a service, sell it for more than it costs you to provide, or same thing with a product, and boom, you got a business. If you can't do that, you don't have a business, or you have like a VC-backed business where you got to raise more money, keep on going. But I think the simplicity of business is something that I misunderstood. And now that I'm running a business, I like to share sort of stories and insights that I have now, because it would have helped me when I was an employee thinking about starting my own thing.
Love that. You mentioned wanting to start a thing for 10 years. What was the tipping point? Was it just the opportunity you saw with offshore talent, or was it just one of these itches that needed to be scratched and you're just like, I'm going to keep my eyes out for potential ideas, potential businesses that I can start. And when the timing is right, I'll make that transition.
Yeah. So it was a very gradual tipping point. Like this wasn't one day I woke up, had an epiphany and made it happen. Like while I was employed, which was my whole career, I always had side hustles or started different business ideas. If I open up my phone, my Notion doc, I have like 120 business ideas in my phone. And that was just sort of how I trained myself and thought about business in general. It was like, hey, how does this business operate? Or what does this one do? And I had, this is probably realistically is probably like my fifth side idea or side hustle that I started. Some of them got off the ground, made money, but I realized I didn't like doing it. Some never even got off the ground, never had customers. It was just a concept or a domain I registered or whatever it may be. But I think that process of like thinking of it, businesses, coming up with businesses, even start launching businesses, helped me, one, get comfortable with the idea of like, hey, I could run a business eventually. But two, it actually helped me realize what type of business I don't want to run. And that was the most valuable thing for me of like, hey, I worked at a bunch of different companies. I tried to start a bunch of companies on side hustles, and I realized which ones I liked and which ones I didn't like, and sort of created reverse checklist. Like I didn't check what I wanted. I checked what I didn't want. And Talently in this business that I run now fell into that bucket of things that I did want and avoided all things that I didn't want. And that's what sort of made that gradual tipping point of like, hey, these 4 other businesses I started, they're all dead. And then this is the one that really like sit well with me. And I thought I could have the right legs to do what I want to do and get the outcomes that I want out of my outcomes. Like I don't want to be a CEO of $1 billion company.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Like, what were some of those things that you didn't want? It sounds like maybe VC backed, like, one of those quote unquote rocket ships and just like kind of out of control. Did you have that checklist like in place ahead of time?
I'd say like the core ones that come to mind immediately, and I'm sure there's a million of them that I thought of throughout the process, but like one of them you hit around the head is like I didn't want to get into VC rat race of like hiring a bunch of devs, burning cash and trying to grow as quick as possible. I didn't want to have any inventory. I don't want to carry inventory and stock it and deal with that and returns and things that go bad or whatever it may be. I didn't want to be geographically limited. I didn't want to only be able to sell in a certain region and be restricted by legal controls or anything like that. I wanted to work from home. I got 3 little kids. Like I want to be home with my family. And I wanted something that would be profitable from day one. Like that was sort of my 5 checklists as I was going to narrow it down. I was like, once I got one customer, my business was profitable. And then it's just about stacking customers and growing and expanding and building a great brand. And if I can do that, I can grow an amazing business, a very profitable business that runs cash flow positive, and I can build a great lifestyle for myself. I don't want a yacht and I want to hang out with Bezos. Like I want to make X amount of money where I'm comfortable and can spend time with my family and kids and go golf when I want and go on vacations when I want. Like that's what I want. I don't want to have 1,000 employees in offices all around the world. And I think knowing what you want and also the timeline of what you want out of it is so important in entrepreneurship. Is like I didn't want cash flow in 10 years. I wanted cash flow in 2 days. So you have to pick the right business to do that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that point right there, it's like I want to be profitable from literally day 2 is one of those things that might sound ridiculous to maybe see even like seasoned entrepreneurs. But to your earlier point is like when you can just simplify business, and yes, if you're building a very challenging, SaaS platform or something, like it's going to take you a little while. You're going to need, you may be able to bootstrap it, you may not be able to bootstrap it, but like the chances of being profitable on day 2 are very, very low, very low. So like service-based businesses, obviously agencies, like can get up and running in a day, and then like day 2 actually make some money and be profitable from that point forward. So
yeah, for sure. And I think that's a really important thing is you have to know what game you're signing up for or what game you want to play. Is like, and it's the same idea with if you're becoming an employee as well. It's like, are you signing up to join a startup, and do you know what that means? Because startups are very volatile. They're not going to pay you the most, but you'll have this lottery ticket of equity, and you'll wear a bunch of different hats. You'll run around, and you have to have the right personality, but you also have to know what you're signing up for. And all these personality types are fine, but you have to know which one you are. Do you like the diverse world of a startup? Do you like the security of big companies where you get cushy stock option plans and you get great benefits and stuff like that, which is perfectly fine. That's for the right personality. Or do you really want to roll the dice and try to start your own business? And it's very rare that like entrepreneurs, the first time they start a business, the first time they come up with a business idea, like that's the one that works. And I think if you're going to start a business, like start with something simple. Go sell something on Etsy. Like, I don't know, just start something simple, like make your first $10 and then figure out what you like and you don't like from there. But I think that's the biggest myth in entrepreneurship is like, at least in the tech world where my background is, you look on TechCrunch, you look on all these websites, is like all these big companies that are trying to take these moonshots, get all the publicity and all the shine. But the plumber around the corner who makes $2 million a year and gets to do whatever he wants, they get no shine. Sign me up for the plumber life. Like I'll run a plumbing business and have people on the ground going to make money for me. Like that sounds way better than raising money and being on TechCrunch news articles and stuff like that.
Yeah, 100%. I'm with you. I love the point about knowing, just figuring out and trying to understand what game you're playing and what game you want to play. Like what game do you want to go play? Because golf is a lot different than basketball, and basketball is a lot different than football. So like know which game you're gonna go play and go figure it out.
100%. No, I think it's important. It's helped me a lot. But you got to know what game you're going to play and what the potential upside and downside of that game is.
Yeah. So speaking of games that we're playing, Offshore Talent is starting to, I would say over the last 5 years or so, like really picking up some steam. Thinking back 5 years ago when it started to kind of ramp up to now, what has been the biggest like kind of eye-opening moment for you starting Talently? I'm not saying that Talently is 5 years old, but like just understanding the industry and like the shift that we've seen recently. What has been the most eye-opening thing about that transition? And then I guess piggybacking off of that question, you can maybe also consider answering, what do you see like in the future 2-3 years? Like where do you see the industry heading?
For sure. So I think there's like two distinct time periods, let's call it, in offshore staffing and offshore recruiting, is pre-COVID and post-COVID. And pre-COVID, or even like way further back for decades and decades, like this concept is not new, right? Like if you call into AT&T or Amex, that person is offshore. And Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies have been doing offshore talent for decades and decades and decades because they need tons of staff. They got keep their costs low. And that's sort of historically the companies in the business have been taking advantage of it because they have the bankroll, they have the ability to go and set up an entity in these countries, rent out office space, outfit them and stuff like that. A business of 20 people or 100 people doesn't have the ability to do that. So that's sort of, I guess, phase one of BPO and offshoring. And then phase two is like the internet age of like, hey, the internet made it available that you can connect with people over Zoom and Hangouts or whatever it may be in any country, and you can work with them. And it was sort of early adopters and thinkers of like, hey, I can hire a dev in Ukraine to support my business. Like, why not? It's so hard to find them. It's hard to recruit them. There's logistics around it, but the internet made it possible. And then COVID sort of broke down the third wall, which was the concept of remote employees. Because historically, you had to be those forward thinkers of like, hey, I can hire a remote person, like 100 people in one office, and we'll have 5 people working all around the world. Then COVID happened and everyone had to be remote, but more importantly, everyone had to become comfortable with working remote. And the idea of working remote is like, hey, now we're comfortable with working remote. I'm based in Toronto. One of my colleagues is in Boston. Why couldn't they be in Johannesburg? Or why couldn't they be in Manila? It doesn't matter if they're in Boston or Manila, they're remote as remote. And post-COVID has sort of changed the shift on that. I think the next iteration of this is the trust iteration. Is now everyone's comfortable with remote, everyone's heard of offshoring or thinks that people can work in other countries, but there's still that trust factor of like, hey, are they going to work on my time zone? Are they actually as smart as North Americans? And we hold ourselves to a very high standard, which is kind of ignorant to think that we're the smartest people in the world because there's talented people everywhere. And I think the fourth phase of this is like that trust barrier coming down of like, hey, this talent is amazing and it's just as good or better than people in my backyard. Now, how do you build that trust? How do you make sure that people trust that? And I think some of the platforms that have really made offshoring accessible, like Upwork and Fiverr and these other platforms, have done a great job to create an open marketplace, but they've done a very bad job at like validating the talent. I don't know if you've ever used or worked with Upwork or any of these platforms. You post a job on Upwork, you get 1,000 applications from every person in Pakistan, the Philippines, and all these countries in an hour. They all look the same, they all sound the same, they all charge the same, and it's impossible to find someone good. And if you can build or somehow create, like, get rid of that and say like, hey, we found the right person for you, we have the best person because of X, Y, and Z, and make sure that you trust that person, that's going to be the next iteration of it. And I think it's just going to gain steam because the globalization of business is inevitable. Every country does business with each other and global trade and all that kind of stuff. Globalization of talents is going to follow suit. And I think it's inevitable. So either ride the wave or get run over.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely relate. I've hired a handful of folks from Upwork, and the vetting process my vetting process has changed significantly since first hiring on Upwork. Hired somebody, didn't work out, hired another person, didn't work out. And then it went back to my process. And we were like, okay, well, what is my process? I always look internally, like what am I doing wrong here? And like, what can I do to fix this? And it ended up being, no, you just have to be way more intentional about who you're bringing on. And if you're going to use Upwork and some other job board sites, like, you have to have a really, really, really thorough, like really robust process in place to vet those folks and get them in.
Yeah, 100%. And it's, hey, again, it's an amazing tool, but the tool's only as good as the person who's using the tool. And yeah, I think what you said like resonates with me, because that's how I did in my old company. Like the people we worked with in Pakistan, we had tasks and projects and work that we needed them to do. I vetted them, found 10, and I gave all 10 similar tasks. Found 3 that were good, and then 2 of them stopped communicating with me, so I ended up with 1. And it was like, what a frustrating process, and it was crazy to do, but hey, either way, it gives you access to those people, and it saves us a ton of time, a ton of money, and added value to our business. But going back to the idea of like, hey, there's value here, but not a great process. Like, how do we improve it? But I think that, to your point of like, what's the future of offshoring? I think that trust creation and exposure, because in our business, and I don't know if you see this or hear this as well, our clients fall into 2 buckets. One bucket, the client is already offshoring talent, understands how it works, has exposure to it, knows the pains, knows the benefits, and either they're looking to add to their team or they're looking to upgrade their existing team because the team that I have right now is not cutting it. The other bucket is people who've heard of offshoring, maybe have considered it before, but never have been in the bullet, doesn't even know where to start. And both of those clients are valuable and have been amazing for us, but they're 2 very different conversations and very different value adds that you're providing, because one, you have to like build the trust, and this is why offshore works. This is how it works. This is how we're going to approach it and make sure that you don't have to do anything. You don't have to lift a finger. The other side is like, hey, sorry to hear you've been burnt or your experience hasn't been great. Why hasn't it been great? Let's talk about it and then see if we can provide an alternative that's going to be better. And that all is rooted in trust.
Yeah, love that. I think it's a great reminder. Not only is the industry, like I completely agree with you. The next, I don't know, 2 to 5 years, it's all about trust and like how to build that trust quickly. But trust can be applied to literally everything. Like trust is applied both internally and externally. Like if I'm working with my team and they don't trust what I'm saying, or they don't trust that I can, hold up my end of the bargain, they're not going to be interested in sticking around very long. If I can't trust that they're able to execute at the high level that we expect, they're not going to be around very long. So
100%.
it starts and stops with trust.
And it's in our businesses too. I'm sure you see it. I don't know if this happened to you, but with Spring Studio, like when you guys deliver for our clients, you build trust with them. And I'm sure, I don't know if your business is built on referrals and intros and stuff like that, but if you deliver for one client, they're going to have a positive mind. You're going to build trust with them, and they're going to be willing to speak to their other friends or whatever it may be and say like, oh, how do you guys design your website or your blogs or whatever? It's like, oh, we use Spring Studio. They're amazing. You guys should speak to them. But that would never happen unless one, you deliver, but that the delivery of it built the trust that you need for business.
I couldn't agree more. I use the analogy of a trust bank with my team pretty much weekly. It's like we all start with a bank that is pretty much maxed out of trust. Like with our clients, I mean, we start with this full bank of trust, and every missed deadline, every bit of friction, every bit of frustration from the client's perspective takes some money out of that trust bank. And it is almost impossible to deposit more back in. Almost impossible. So start with 100, and then all of a sudden we're at 70, and then 60, and then we're going to see some churn, and we're going to have to do the whole thing over again.
Yeah,
So
100%.
keeping that trust bank full is super important.
I like that. I like that analogy and visual of a trust bank.
Yeah. All right, cool. So let's wrap on what's next for Talently. I'm super excited to hear about what you guys got going on over there. Any big plans that you're focused on or working on right now?
Yeah, it's in my world, it's growth, and that's in every business, right? It's like we're just trying to grow our customer base and our reach. The big thing for us is we're extremely heavily service-based business, right? Like we deliver on time. To your point, we provide the right talent, and the talent works out. And the nice thing for us is like we get a ton of recurring clients coming back and saying, hey, we have one guy who's great, we're looking to hire again, here's another person, we need another girl. Or we have a lot of intros and references. So we're seeing the compounding effects of hustle and growth. My background is sales, so really my focus is just going out there, hitting the pavement, getting as many cold introductions and emails and LinkedIn messaging, cold calls out there to build our baseline. And we're already seeing the sort of snowball effect of that, of like, hey, delivering well for the first tranche of clients, and they're bringing in more clients with us. So it's really about stacking demand and then stacking the people to help grow the company from there. But it's not rocket science. It's just hustle, grit, and determination is really our focus right now.
Nice. I love that. I thought that was going to be my last question, but selfishly, I've got one more. You mentioned cold outreach being something that you're kind of focused on. Do you have any tips for other business owners, other entrepreneurs that are looking at cold outreach as like their main source of client acquisition? Like anything that they can do right away to help with that?
This will be a direct and indirect answer. So one, cold outreach is tough, and it's getting tougher. And it doesn't work anymore to send generic emails saying this is what we do, this is the value we can provide, and blah, blah, blah. The best thing you can do as a business, and something I'm doing constantly, is asking the question of your buyer is like, who, and I ask myself this all the time, who would hire South African talent? Seems like a pretty straightforward question, but when you think about it, you try to think through different strategies, and I'll give a perfect example. It's like my concept is like, who would be inclined to hire South African talent? Let me think. Maybe someone who already hires offshore somewhere else, or someone who has a South African person in their family, or whatever it may be. Or how about someone who's from South Africa and it happens to be a CEO in another country now? They probably have national ties. They have family back there. They visit from time to time. They speak with the same accent. And that was an idea that I had. I said, perfect. Let's go run this campaign and see how it works. So I went and found every single CEO in North America and the UK who graduated from a university in South Africa. It was roughly 6,000 CEOs. We ran custom campaigns targeting each category, country, and university. So we set up like drip campaigns specific to what university they graduated from, what industry they're in, and what country they're located in. And all the messaging and communication through cold email, cold calls, cold LinkedIn DM, LinkedIn connections, all that kind of stuff is specific to that information. We had like a set 20% reply rate. I don't know what the actual numbers were in front of me, but this was like my 26th campaign that I ran. I forget what it is. I record all my campaign strategies and outline them, so I have them for reference of which ones work. And this was like my 20-something odd campaign that we ran, and it had unbelievable results. And the nice thing for anyone who's listening right now is like cold email, if you figure it out, and cold outbound, if you figure it out, is the biggest cheat code in business because it costs you nothing. If you do it well, you don't have to spend any money on it. You don't have to spend paid ads. There's no variable pricing. I pay $100 a month for an Apollo account that gives me all the data that I need and all the emailing and DMing that I need. And for that, if I book one client, I pay for it 10 times over. If I book 100 clients, it's like my fountain of money for my business. So if you can crack the code on cold outbound, it's amazing. It is not easy. It takes a lot of trial and error, but more importantly, it takes a lot of strategy and a lot of personalization. And I'm not saying that's how you should go target and think about universities, but hopefully that gives you some sort of fuel to say like, oh, who is my client willing to speak to, or why would they be willing to speak to me? And then take that sort of own personalization to approach it. And if it clicks and when it clicks, it is the greatest feeling in the world. It's going to burn before you get there because everyone's going to tell you to F off via email or wherever. But when you do get it, it's like magic.
That's fantastic. How did you come up with that specific campaign? Like 26, 27 times in, it's just like, this isn't working. This isn't working. This is working okay. But like, where did that idea come from?
And I just constantly asked that question. It was like, my idea was like, who would hire a South African employee? My next idea is like, hey, who would hire a South African employee? Probably companies that already have South African employees. They're already sold on the concept. They already have employees. Guess what? Now I'm going to scrape every single company in North America that currently has South African employees. Boom, I just got another 100,000 companies to go after, or whatever it may be. So these questions I'm constantly asking myself is like, not what can I provide, but it's like, why would my buyer be interested in speaking to me? I think that's really important to think. Same idea for you guys, Spring Studio. It's like, hey, why would someone want to work with Spring Studio? Why would someone want like a turnkey design solution? I don't know. You got to go answer that question. And for me, going back to like the iteration of it, is like, you should see all my Apollo campaigns. Like some of them were horrible, have like a 0% reply rate or a 2% reply rate or whatever, maybe 10% open rate. But you got to take those swings to be able to hit the home run. And when you do, just like go all in on it and milk that sucker as long as you can. But yeah, I could talk about good campaigns forever. I could also talk about bad campaigns forever because not all campaigns are successful.
Yeah. Follow-up episode for sure.
There you go. 100%. Happy to chat sales. If anyone is listening wants to talk outbound strategy, like feel free to DM me. It's like, I love talking about it. I love strategizing on it. So happy to connect with any listeners, or we can take this offline and we can talk about it as well. But yeah, there's tons of value in there. And yeah, entrepreneurship is tough. So if you can learn from others, it makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, 100%. This has been fantastic. Where can people find you, can find Talently if they want to get in touch?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm extremely active on LinkedIn. So if anyone wants to connect on LinkedIn on a personal level, not a business level, Daniel Seligman, founder of Talently on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect there and shoot over questions or just connect, whatever you want. And then if anyone's interested in Talently and working with us, the website's hirewithtalently.com, or you can just shoot me a LinkedIn DM and I'll make sure we take good care of you. But yeah, happy to connect with anyone on the personal side or the business side. We're happy to help.
Nice. Great. Awesome. Thanks, man. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
All right.